Okay, my students, remember we are discussing the terminologies which can be used within our topic, which is irritability and coordination. And we have another term that is response, since the less of the terminology have been discussed on their previous lesson. So here, my students, we are beginning to look the response. So what is this response? Here we are saying that the response is the action or reaction of an organism to the stimulus. So it's the way the organism adapt or react on the changes in the environment. So response ndiyo ambayo sasa ina act upon the stimulus, that is reaction of an organism to the stimulus. For example, let's take the same example that we have seen in the previous session, on the previous part of this session, that we have seen the snake. So the response that will come into your mind after the coordinator to interpret that is dangerous thing, or that is dangerous is snake. So you have to run. So the process is that a person that is to run, meaning that that is appropriate response that is provided by the coordinator. So the stimulus there, we can say that it is a snake, but the appropriate response for you an organism is to run from that snake. Hiyo ndio tunaita response. And here we are saying that it is the way an organism adapted and reacted to the changes into the environment. Even take an example, the changes that are occurring within the environment may be cold. Kuna baridi sana. The response pale tunasema mtu yule atachukua masweta, ataanza kuvaa, makoti makubwa, majaketi atavaa. Hile sasa ni response. Kwa sababu gani? Kulikuwa na stimulus ambayo inaitwa cold. So that an organism provide appropriate response by wearing a sweaters and a coat. So that is all about the response. So my student, those terminology we're going to use throughout when we are discussing this topic of coordination and the irritability. So you have to be aware about those terminologies. So now we can move on our intended subtopic that we need to understand in this session. And this is, we are talking about central nervous system. It is abbreviated by CNS. Meaning that is central nervous system. So here, my student, we are saying that the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord, has the gray matter and white matter. So tunasema tukiongelea central nervous system, my student, here we include the brain together with the spinal cord. Lakini sasa ndani ya hile brain au ndani ya hile spinal cord, there is a presence of gray and white matter. When we are going more further, we're going to discuss in details what are those gray matter and what are those white matter and their function in general. So we're going to read it on the next session. But here you have to know that within the brain and within the spinal cord is where now white and gray matter are found or are located. And also we can say that this gray matter is comprised of the cell body, dendrites, and myelinated axon, and very few unmyelinated axon. So within this gray matter ambayo inapatikana ndani ya spinal cord or within the brain, tunasema kwamba ndani yake kuna hizi content ambazo zinapatikana. Mainly here we are talking about cell bodies, dendrites, unmyelinated axon, and very few myelinated axon. We're going to see this structure, that is dendrites and myelinated axon, myelinated axon, when we're going to discuss on the structure of the neuron. But in contrast, in the white matter is comprised of the myelinated axon. So ndani ya white matter there is only myelinated axon. Tukisema myelinated axon ni ile axon ambayo inakuwa ina contain myelin sheath. Lakini kule kwenye gray matter there is few amount of this myelinated axon, but there is a lot of unmyelinated axon. A good example, we can say that a relay neuron, that is a neuron that lack a myelin sheath. So here we can say also, the main function of the central nervous system is to integrate the information from various sources. To integrate, to provide the appropriate response. Tunasema ndani ya central nervous system ndipo ambapo kuna brain na spinal cord. Sasa brain na spinal cord inafanya kazi gani kwa ujumla? Tunasema hii kazi yake ni kutafsiri information zozote zinazotokea ndani ya environment na kuprovide about appropriate response to act according to that stimulus or any changes that is occurring within the environment. That is the main role or the main function of the central nervous system, and you have to keep it into your mind. And now we are saying that the collection both from the internal and external environment is done by receptors. So the correction of the information or the correction of the impulse from the outside environment is done by receptors. As I have said, we are discussing about the receptors. We have seen that receptors, a good example, are sense organ. So zile sense organ tunasema kwamba ndizo ziko responsible kwa ajili ya kudetect any kind of changes that is occurring on the outside environment. They are after to bring about appropriate response. And here we can say that they are usually sensory system. Along with neurons will transmit the corrected information from different part. Kwa hiyo sasa zile receptors zitachukua information, thereafter zile information zitaenda wapi? Zitaingia ndani ya neuron. Ile neuron ndiyo ambayo structure iko responsible kwa ajili ya kutransmit au kutransfer hizo information kwenda kwenye brain for interpretation. Na ndio maana hapa tumesema kwamba they usually from the sensory neuron and neuron which transmit and collect information from different parts. So neuron iko responsible kwa ajili ya correct the information from different part of the body. It can be either on the legs, on the hand, and so on, in different part of the body. So this information are collected through the receptor. So now, the corrected information is processed and integrated into the central nervous system. Finally, the information is transmitted to the effector. So the muscles or the gland which produce appropriate response. So hile muscles baada sasa ya kucorrect hile information kutoka kwenye receptor, zile information is to be transmitted or to be sent kwenye central nervous system, that is from the spinal cord and the brain. So hile brain ita-integrate, itatafsiri hile information. Ikisha tafsiri ndipo ambapo ita bring about a appropriate response. Kwa maana kwamba zile information au ile integrated information ita enter into the effector. Effector hapa tunasema inaweza ikawa muscles au inaweza ikawa gland. Ndipo ambapo ita provide appropriate response to the change that is occurring within the environment. My student, I prepare for you this picture. I hope you can understand the function of the central nervous system. As you can see here, this one is the integration or tunasema kwamba hii ndiyo coordination in general. For instance, here we have our stimulus. This one is the stimulus. Huyu mtu ameona hili tunda limeiva kwenye mti limeiva. So what kind of action will it taking place within their body? Jicho ndio tunaita receptor. So receptor is to receive the information from the environment. So the information that the receptor that ambayo ime-receive tunasema hapa the presence of the lipid fluid. Thereafter, the receptor will send the information into the neuron. Sasa hizi neuron ndizo tunasema ziko responsible kwa ajili ya kutransmit hizi information kutoka kwenye hile receptor kwenda kwenye central nervous system. And central nervous system, as I have said, it comprises of the spinal cord together with the brain. This one is the brain and this one is the spinal cord. So the spinal cord and the brain will integrate the information that is ndipo hapa akili itakwambia kwamba ili ni tunda limeiva. Kwa sasa kama tunda limeiva unatakiwa ufanyeje? Unatakiwa provide appropriate response. Kwa maana kwamba ndo hapa sasa ile muscles itaenda kutungua and itaenda kutoa lile tunda lilokuwa kwenye mti au lilokuwa kwenye sehemu yoyote. Thereafter utafanyaje? Utalichukua lile tunda, kama utalila, ile ndio itakuwa response ambayo utakuwa umeprovide. But the effector here is the muscle. So muscle will contract in order to get that ripened fruit. So after contraction ndipo ambapo sasa hapa unaweza ukapata lile tunda, as you can see this one. So the response here either to eat that ripened fruit or to carry it into another place. So that decision that you made after you take the ripened fruit is what we call the response, and that is coordination in general, that is bring about the central nervous system. Because central nervous system ndiyo ambayo ina bring about appropriate response to any kind of changes that is occurring within the environment. So my student, after you have seen this example, simply example, I hope now you can understand, or you can even explain what is the stimulus, you can explain what is the receptor, what are the central nervous system, what are the effector, and what is the response. My student, this one is spinal cord and spinal cord together with the brain ndio ambayo tunaita coordinator. So kazi ya coordinator to integrate any kind of information that come from the receptor and to provide appropriate response. So the response inabidi send kwenye effector. So effector ndio ambapo ata contract thereafter to take in that fruit. So that is the response. And that, my student, after we have seen the irritability introduction on the central nervous system, and that marked the end of our today's session. So thank you for listening and for following us, Educare TZ. Bye bye. Have a nice moment.